Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Hanging Out with K-Dubs. That's me. I got a special guest here today and new guest on the podcast, Mr. John Bartman. John, how are we doing?
Hey, Cal. Good to see you, man.
It's good to see you too. It's been a while. I know that for a fact.
It is.
But thanks for taking the time. I know we're in spring. It's supposed to be out planting something, but Mother Nature's continuing to throw curveballs at us for that.
Certainly is. It feels like it's March 15th out there. It's crazy.
It looks like this week the weather's going to be nice. So probably a little rain in the forecast, but the heat units are going to be here now. So hopefully that'll help out. You got anything in the ground right now?
Other than sweet corn's the only thing I have. Yeah.
That's all right. You can hold off yet. It's still early.
Yeah. There's been some years where we've gotten corn and beans in the ground by the 10th of April, and it works out okay. But, it's still early, yeah.
Yeah, it is. You got plenty of time. Well, anyway, again, thanks for coming. We've got quite a bit to talk about today. I'm looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have. And but let's I like to start off getting background on all my guests, and I like to try to skip like high school and beyond. So you graduated high school.
Yeah, I was a Marion kid.
Marion Central.
I was a Marion kid, yeah. Grew up in Marengo my whole life, and Mom and Dad said, "We're Catholic, you're going to Marion." And that's the end of that.
Well, that's probably not a bad choice. I mean, I don't know how public schools were when you were going to public schools, but I know nowadays they're not. I don't think they're as good as they used to be.
There were pluses and minuses to both. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. So you graduated from Marion Central.
Yep. Went to college. I wanted to be a plumber. Mom said, "You're going to go to college, and if you want to be a plumber after that, you can do so." So anyway, I went to college.
Where'd you go?
I went to the University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
So always the team that when they're in the NCAA tournament, you want to pick them because they usually do the upset. Usually get you to the round of 32, if not the Sweet 16. Mm-hmm. So it's always a good bracket buster team when we're in there. We got kind of hosed over this year. Should have been it, but didn't happen.
Well, you can't win them all.
Yeah.
You can't win them all. What'd you study then when you were in?
I ended up with a communication management degree is what I ended up. And side note, it was a Catholic university. I ended up with a religious studies minor too. So you had a choice between, you had to take so many philosophies and so many religion classes. And I absolutely hated philosophy. There was I had a professor who said, "Mr. Bartman, do we exist or not?" And I literally just said, "Professor, if I don't exist, why did I give you a tuition check at the beginning of the year? Because if I don't, I really would like that back."
You can make it out to cash. I'm good.
Make it out to cash, right? That didn't go over so well.
Yeah, I'm sure not.
So yeah, as a consequence, I ended up with a lot more religion classes. And then my senior year, my advisor said, "Well, you take one more, you could have a minor." I'm like, "Okay.
Okay, I can do that."
So,
what does a communications management degree all involve?
Well, that's a good question. It's funny how that all comes fully together. It's the idea that you're studying communication. 90% of all problems in any agency, any private for-profit group revolve around communication.
Well, I mean, even just regular business.
And business as well. And so, yes, there was certainly a marketing and business element that was involved in that as well. So I ended up with that. But the big push was to get done in 4 years, to get your degree, move on, get out and get yourself a job.
So you didn't. So let me ask this in a way. So it kind of sounded like you were forced to go to college by your parents or your mom or whoever said, "Hey, you're going to college," kind of no matter what, huh?
Absolutely. My mom is very, very adamant. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. I had 3 older sisters. She's so super proud that all of her kids went to college. That was her big thing. And so, we ended up doing that, and that was part of the equation, and it worked out okay.
Did you ever think about farming during when you were out there at that time, or was farming?
I wanted to farm ever since I was a little kid. It was great. Growing up, going to Dwayne's in Belvedere on Fridays. You'd go to the auction barn. That was always a fun thing to do. And then we'd end up going to Poultry afterwards in Belvedere, Rest Its Soul, or Wallem International. And that was always a good thing. But as I said, I'm at the tail end of Gen X, and I've never been able to fit in a generational group because I'm the youngest of my family, and I've got a lot of, where I graduated high school, it was 96, so I've never fit into a group per se. But yeah, I wanted to farm, but it was told absolutely not. You will not be farming. You have to figure out something else to support yourself. And I thought that was BS personally. And so I wanted to get to the root cause of, if I can't farm, why can't I farm? Why can't good people who grew up on farms, and why were my neighbors and friends in the 80s, why were they going bankrupt? What caused that?
Yeah, because you grew up at a time where farming was far from profitable. It was literally getting by.
That's right. 1980, we had 5 million farmers. By the end of 1988, we were down to 2 million farmers. It's a huge drop.
60%.
Yeah.
60% of the farmers went bankrupt between 1980 and 1988.
That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I can see where your parents are coming from then.
Oh,
right, because they're sitting here. What year did you graduate high school?
96.
96. So here you are, early teenager or whatever, adolescent.
Yeah.
And you probably didn't know any better at the time, but you understood that this is what you want to do. But your parents look at it going, wow, that farm just left. That farm just went bankrupt. They just had an auction 3 miles over here, and it's all within months or short period of years from each other.
That's right. And when you had like the Illinois Agri News and you'd get the newspaper, I mean, 3/4 of it was auction notices. And it was just, it was crazy. It was like, why is this happening?
So I'm assuming you dug into that then.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I knew that I wanted to get involved with this. And I was really fortunate growing up. I had a lot of good teachers who saw that in me and encouraged me to kind of go on the governmental side of things. I had a really great congressional internship with Congressman Manzullo, of all people, which is a pretty cool story how that happened.
How'd that happen? Let's talk about it, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, we, many of you may realize, but we have the oldest sweet corn stand in McHenry County, continuous sweet corn stand. And to his credit, he pulled up one day when I was in, I want to say, it was junior high. He came up and with his family, they all came in, and I remember it was really cute. They had a minivan with his sign pulled behind the minivan, and they pulled in, and his whole family jumped out of the minivan, and they came around, and they're like, "Oh, sweet corn stand, how great! This is so wonderful." Yes, this was right. He didn't get elected yet. It was his campaign year, first year, and I remember going around, and his son went to our cash box, and he opened up the cash box, and he looked in it, and he goes, "Do you make a lot of money?" and I remember saying, "Mr. Manzullo, are you a Republican?" And he goes, "Well, yes, I am." I said, "Okay, well, that explains a lot." So anyway, I thought that was a cute story. And so, but to his credit, he came back every year. He remembered my name. He came back every year. And he asked, "John, how you doing?" I said, "Congressman, I'm doing great." And so there would be people that we'd have customers, and I'd say, "Mr. and Mrs. Jones, this is your Congressman, Manzullo, who's here." And they're like, "Oh, wow, that's really great." And he came around every year, and he was just like, "John, you're at school now. What do you want to do? What do you want to be?" And I said, "Well, I kind of enjoy government. I would mind studying poli-sci." He goes, "Don't do that." He was very dumb. I said, "Really? Why do you feel that way?" He goes, "Because you should find something else in your life or some other major that can enhance that." And he said, "Poli-sci, you can learn that anywhere." And I said, "Oh, well, that's pretty good." And he goes, "If you ever want an internship, let me know." And so let my office know. So I took advantage. Very
I would have
nice
too.
People.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very nice people. And then I also had one when I was in college too, and that was pretty cool. And that was a really nice thing to have. Tony Hall, he was a congressman in Dayton, Ohio. He ended up working for the United Nations, and he was in charge of their food program.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
what a small world.
It was the two ends of it. And the thing was that they both congressmen knew each other. And so I've never bashed people for their political affiliations because it's a label to get you on the ballot at the end of the day.
Yeah, more than likely.
And are you a good person? Can you handle the job? That's the key.
Those are the two key questions.
Can you handle the job? And why do you want this job?
Mm-hmm.
That's always the first thing that every voter should ask. Why do you want this job? Can you handle this job?
And you probably learned a lot of that being intern from both of those then.
Oh, sure. And then I did some other work as well. So that ended up doing it. So no, it worked out really well. And so I ended up my senior year, I ended up graduating, and Jack Franks was our state rep, and he asked me to work for him. So I said, sure, I'll go ahead and help you out, Jack. So that was a neat experience. And so I worked for him. I worked for a few campaigns after that, which was a
now was that like a full-time gig, or was that just...
This was just campaign work.
Okay.
This was campaign work where you just sign a contract for the campaign. And I was in my 20s. And then Bob McHenry, God bless him, from Harvard, he ended up passing away. And people said, you should become chairman of the local party. So at 24, I became the chairman of the Democratic Party of McHenry County. Yeah.
24.
At 24.
That's pretty young. I mean, if you think about it in the realm of things.
Yeah, but you know what? Kids that are 18, 19 years old are on the front line getting shot at, too.
True.
So
very true.
I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I had gone through and Dayton, Ohio at the time was in Montgomery County. And Montgomery County was the swing county of Ohio at that time. And up until like 2020, Ohio was the swing state of the U.S. So whoever won Montgomery County, where Dayton was located,
was probably going to win the state.
So there was a lot of attention there. And so that was pretty exciting, too, because every race mattered. That kind of came up with a different mentality.
Well, and it's not that you didn't have the education, and it's not that you didn't have the experience to become chairman at 24.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, I mean, you worked for two different congressmen as interns, as doing whatever they needed and wanted you to do. Plus, you have the communications major. You'd probably be a perfect person for that specific role. Really.
And I also worked at Farm and Fleet. So when I wasn't farming at home, I worked at Farm and Fleet in Woodstock, too. So that was kind of an inside joke with the congressman's office. They gave me like 25 hours or something a week, and then I would leave at 3 o'clock. And then so are you going to work at Farm and Fleet now, John? I said, yeah, I'm on a Farm and Fleet.
Got to go do what I got to do.
And it was so cool. And the people there were like, hey, you're such a good guy. What are you studying? And what do you want to do? I said, I enjoy government. I enjoy farming. And they're like, you're too honest, too nice of a guy to do that. Why do you want to do that? I'm like, because somebody needs to, So I don't know. It's always a good memory to think back on.
No, absolutely. So that's kind of really how you got really started into politics then, between the internships, college, and then working for Jack Franks.
Yes.
Outside of all that.
And then I was able to have a quote unquote office and have a say in how things work and really understand the ins and outs of how things work in the state. And nationally too. Yeah, because a lot of that, I don't think the normal person understands a lot of that. I think there's smart people that can theorize all the government red tapes that you got to walk through and you got to go through, but it can be very, very confusing. Yeah, it can be, but there's a process, and that's the thing that you have to realize. What is the process? Why does X, Y, Z happen? How do you make 1, 2, 3 equals the end result that you need to have? Right. And there's laws, and it's called laws and the rule of the law. It's just that simple. There's laws out there for a reason. And they're made because of whatever said reason has been done, has been tried, X, Y, Z, Right. Let's swing back a little bit because we're going to get to the common, not the common stuff, the stuff that's going on today. But you said you did a lot of research from back in the 80s on why
a lot of farms failed, 60%.
Sure.
Can you go into detail on some of that?
Yeah, it's very, very simple. We overproduced, and we didn't have a market for anything. That was the biggest problem of all. And the other big problem was that we had a government policy that was stupid. It was stupid. We had the set-aside program in the 1980s where we went out and
God, I haven't heard that.
do you remember
word in
the
years.
The set-aside program where you had let's say you had an 80-acre field, but you had to take at least 10% of it out of production. And so I remember as a kid, my dad planting cereal rye, on the headlands. And I remember looking at the stuff going, man, this stuff is really great. This is so wonderful. Why don't we harvest it or do something with it?
Can't.
You can't. We gotta plow it under. Oh, okay, that doesn't make sense. And then at the same time, we had kids that were starving in Ethiopia. Like, why are we doing this? This is dumb. And then you just slowly saw the progression. I remember Mom listening to the noon show on WGN with Orion Samuelson, the voice of God, saying, corn is down, limit again. Like, gosh, this is ridiculous. Why is this happening? And so it was overproduction.
So we created we created too much production in corn, beans, wheat,
pork,
rye. I was just going to say beef, pork, everything. So that's hence, and we had nowhere to sell it to.
And we had nowhere
the
to
United
sell
States
it to.
as a whole had nowhere to sell that extra product to.
That's correct. And the corn, and so here we are sitting with this, and then I also remember we had solar panels. International Harvester made solar panels.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they made solar panels. And all those programs kind of got cut by the wayside. And the whole renewable fuels, that was the big thing that started up in the 70s as well. And how can we make gasohol work? Which became ethanol, as we well know. So it was public policy that made the ethanol mandate, E10, which is now universal throughout the U.S.
Pretty much.
But that had to happen through the government making the decision and get laws passed to make ethanol what it is today. And so now that we have an outlet for that corn now. And so once we had the ethanol mandate, then we saw some profitability come back into the market. We had a place to go with that big glut of corn that we produce. And it's the same thing. I get so nervous, and God love you, the National Corn Growers. Did you see their poster that came out about the yield contest that came through?
No, I don't think I did.
It was nice because it told you, what grower had the most bushels for strip till, for no till, for conventional till, irrigated.
All the different stuff.
But the thing was, the slogan on the back of it said, you can never have enough yield. And I'm like, we're in a down market. That's not the message that we should be sending out to farmers right now. If you look from a macro level, right? In a perfect world, every farmer, we have to have a drought everywhere else except for your farm, right? I want $9 corn. Give me $9 corn. Well, we need to have Argentina, Brazil, and the rest of the United States to suffer a major drought. Then you have $9 corn. Well, that's what happened in '88 because we didn't have a market for it, but we suffered the big drought. And corn went back up to $3. Because remember, in '86, it was down to $1.50 on the board. That was the average for the year. But I remember as a family, we were selling corn below $1 a bushel. And that was ridiculous. Because in the 70s, we were around that $4 mark. So it was a bad time.
Thank God that's over with.
Hopefully. God, I hope.
There's some things that you say that I agree. When we have a down market like this, it's so hard especially when you're a grain farmer, because you just don't know where everything's going to be at. You don't know. You have an idea what your seed bill is going to be. You have an idea what your fertilizer bill is going to be, but you have no idea what fuel is going to do. You have no idea the parts that you're going to buy for your equipment to keep going out in the field. You have no idea what your yield's going to be.
Yes.
And that's so hard to sit down, manage that all, and go, well, gee, I need 185 bushel corn just to break even.
That's right. But we also
at the market we're at today, whatever number that is.
But we also need to have more farmers, because when we have more farmers buying equipment, and therefore the parts that we need get cheaper because there are more farmers out there. I mean, the analogy that I always talk about is we still have a 40-20 that my grandparents bought brand new in 1966. Still have it. Runs great. That oil filter still is about $6.50. Now, the biggest tractor that I have now is a 1999 John Deere 9400. That's my big tractor.
Know 'em well.
And it's about $60 for that one. Well, what's the difference? They made a heck of a lot. They made so many more 40-20s than they did 9400s. So we have to have more farmers in the game.
Well, I want to say I agree with you, but I kind of disagree with you as well. So if you think back to when they made a 40-20,
yeah,
okay, a lot of farms were just, that's it. They had 80 acres or 100 acres here. They had cattle, they had beef, they had chickens, they had a whole ton of diversity. Yep. In today's world, it's super hard to have diversity like that on a farm and be profitable.
Well, that is a good question for if you're doing a regenerative farming talk. Because if I had kids, I would have cattle again. And I would have them out there eating the cover crops that I have right now.
Well, so in a situation, and in a situation like yours, that would be ideal, right? But if you get to where now farming is a business, it does come down to, am I in the black or am I in the red? And if I'm going to be in the black, this is what we need to do. Right. And if I'm going to be in the red, this is what we need to do. And it also comes down to time management as well. We all know that.
But also input costs. So if you're able to have a soil that produces on its own, and you're able to take nitrogen from the atmosphere and from the manure, your input costs are significantly less too. I think you can still get some of that nowadays with micronutrients that they have out there and taking care of the soil that you have, as far as like calcium levels and mag levels and all that stuff. All of that can add in there too. For it. Those are input costs that you still have to pay for. And don't get me wrong, I'm happy with it, and I'm buying stuff too. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, if I had kids, that's the one thing that I tell people who are like, how can kids get involved in agriculture? Well, go ahead and put livestock back on the farm again. Yeah, stop by the farm. Stop by any farm. That's right. Have a conversation. Most people ain't going to complain and do anything about that. Right. Okay, so after we've had that conversation, I watched your ABC 7 news story. They came out and had a conversation with you about all this. Are you seeing the same kind of trends then right now from the 80s to today's? Yes, I'm very nervous. I'm very, very nervous about today. And I'm nervous currently because we have the USAID program that is shut down. USAID, 40% of their grain, they purchase over $1 billion worth of grain every year. USAID has been around since the Kennedy administration, and it really does a nice job. Are there some things that people could say that need to be fixed? Yes. Just like anywhere else. Just like anywhere else, but it's less than 0.5% of what the federal government spends its money on. And it was also designed as a way for us as farmers to take the glut of commodities that we have and put it on the world market. And it gives us soft power throughout the world and say to people who are starving, hey, the United States is actually the good guy. We're giving you food. We're giving you medicine. Please do not start a war against us, because we actually are doing positive things. So it seems like you've done a lot of homework on this, and I haven't done that much homework on it. But so you're telling me that when USAID was still around, they would purchase the extra product that the United States had and then distribute it to places that were needed? Yes, and they would also distribute it through faith-based organizations like Catholic Charities, Lutheran Charities. Even the Mormon Church gives money to the Catholic Church, believe it or not, because they do. The Mormon Church gives money to the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church does such a good job of distributing food and medicine throughout the world. They said, why should we start our own program when you guys are doing such a good job? Let's partner together, which I think is pretty cool.
That makes sense. That makes total sense.
But that's where most of the grain comes. And if you look at it, just do a Google search for Catholic Charities right now. They've kind of have this little campaign to save USAID without coming out and saying it, because they're showing all the poor people in Latin America and in Asia and Africa with a USAID bag. It says on the bag, given to you by the people of the United States of America. I mean, it's been a really good program. So that's the first thing that really worries me.
And how much did you say that they would buy? Like
at least $1 billion. It's at least $1 billion.
$1 billion a year worth of commodities.
Worth of our commodities. And remember, I talked about the kids in Ethiopia. There's farmers down in Georgia who've created their own co-op where they make their own peanut butter. And that is the first meal that those kids who faced malnutrition with, is that type of peanut butter that's been patented. But then after a while, then they get American sorghum, they get American wheat bread that gets brought into it. So it's a nice program that a lot of people have kind of forgotten about it.
Yeah, I didn't know that USAID did that.
Yeah.
I did not know.
Yep.
Obviously, it depends on what news outlet you watch. It's because of this and this and this is why they shut it down, but it's because of this and this is why they didn't want it shut down. I didn't know any of that, but
and then I'm also worried about, the USDA freezes. Okay. I'm in that boat of people who were in the Climate Smart program, which was offered through the DeLong Company. There's currently still 200 farmers who still haven't been paid from that. And there's thousands of farmers throughout the country who still haven't been paid for it. And we signed a contract that if we would have planted no-till, which actually you could get away with doing minimum till, it was anything but moldboard plowing, you qualified for it.
Chisel plowing, right? Probably, if you deep ripping.
Yeah, as long as you're not having the soil kick up in the air by a moldboard plow, you qualified for it. If you use cover crops, you got some money for doing that. If you did nutrient management, basically if you got your soil testing for free, right? That's basically what the whole program was.
Yeah, no, so the USDA does have some great programs out there that, for those that don't know, that if you do some of the things that you say, minimum till, you do your soil samples, the government, the USDA will actually pay the farmers X amount of dollars per acre to be in this program. But you actually have to prove that you're doing these things to the USDA and the government.
But the other nice thing about the program, Kyle, is that it was a public-private partnership, meaning that you had to have private investment involved, which in our case is the DeLong Company, where an ADM was involved in this too, and PepsiCo and everybody else, so that they could then take that grain and market it as being sustainable. So even if you're a farmer...
You're talking DeLongs could take that grain and market it as sustainable.
As sustainable, that's correct. That's correct. And so even if you're a farmer that thinks this is all BS, I could give two craps about it, well, guess what? My corn is not being commingled with your corn. So therefore, other countries and other places, hog farms that don't care if it's sustainable or not, well, guess what? Your grain is going to end up being worth more because you're not competing against my grain that's been commingled with it, which is what we really, really need. And then the other nice thing about it was that, which didn't get any I don't know why more farm publications haven't picked up on it, was the 45Z biofuel program.
Yeah, I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, well, that was through the previous administration. It was for advanced biofuels for jet fuel, and and it could also be used for corn-based ethanol as well for your cars. Okay, that program has been approved, and it's the whole idea of, okay, if we're going to have electric cars, that's fine, whatever you think about them, but you can't put batteries in airplanes.
No.
Okay, it's just not going to happen. They're way too much. And they said, well, let's use jet fuel, because actually jet fuel and ethanol work better than for a car, believe it or not, the octane ratios. And so here we are right next to O'Hare that's a perfect blend for it. And I was in this past summer, I was with Farm Bureau. I went to DC and we helped lobby for 45Z.
Okay.
Okay. And the other cool thing about it is that if you're in the DeLong program or any climate smart program, your grain is already certified. And the USDA is giving a tax credit to the ethanol plants who produce this.
Is there a lot of ethanol plants that are or were producing this?
No,
Z45?
They can, because it's just as simple as it's just got to be for instance, me with my semi going to the ethanol plant in Rochelle and saying, okay, I'm certified. Okay, well, we could put this in another tank because you have documentation that your grain has reached the certification.
Not only from the government, but from the private entity, which is known as DeLong's,
Right.
which is who you're using.
And that tax credit was worth to us as the farmer between 50 cents and $1 per bushel.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That's a lot. And that was supposed to be set up for the year 2025. So if you were in that program in 2024 and you had that corn in the bin, all you need to do is have the Trump administration right now sign a pen and say, yes, we want 45Z to happen. It's stuck in the Treasury Department with the IRS for them to sign off and say, this is a good program. And this isn't a new program. This is something that all the commodity groups asked for the last 15 years, long before the Biden administration. Everybody else
So this fuel, let me get back to the fuel before we get to the program.
Yep.
So this fuel, I take it it's a blend between jet fuel and ethanol then? Am I understanding that correct? This Z45?
Yeah, but you can have more, it will take more ethanol in it than jet fuel for the tank.
Okay. So you're going to use up theoretically more corn crop
You're going to use more corn anyway. Exactly.
than what you would normally use with E15 or E85, whatever, 15% ethanol, whatever it is.
E15. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. And then, so this program has been out for quite, like you said, 15 years or something like that.
That was when it started to get the groundwork going.
Gotcha.
And so for the last 3 years, they were debating it. They put it, it's been voted on by Congress. It just needs to be approved by the Trump administration for them to sign off on.
Is there a reason why you don't think it is being approved? Because theoretically it could have been approved, like you said, in the last 3 years. Is there a reason why you think that it's not being approved?
Well, personally, from what I've been able to gather is like with the Climate Smart program, the Trump administration basically, all they're doing is they're going to keep the program. They're just changing the name of it. Okay. And they basically said, because it's the Inflation Reduction Act, anything that had Joe Biden's name on it, they don't like.
It was just like when Joe Biden got in, anything Trump had, they don't like it.
We don't like it. Anything with the environment, anything green, we don't like it. But yet, those three practices of no-till, nutrient management, and cover crops, the USDA has been promoting that
for years,
since the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. So it's been 100 years that they've been promoting these same programs, which at the same time also is good for combating climate change. Whether you believe it or not, it does, but you still qualify for the program.
That's super interesting. Yeah, because if it's been sitting on our federal government's desk for 3 years, there's got to be a reason behind it that you and I probably don't know. And
the other reason, which is my own opinion, but if you look at the documentation for who gives money, the Trump administration has been very close with the oil, with big oil. It just has been. And that's why during his previous administration, the first time around, we had so many waivers granted to refineries saying, no, you don't need to put ethanol in your blends. And that was a nod to big oil. And so lately what they said is, okay, renewable fuels and oil, you guys need to sit in a room and figure it out. That's what he just said for the last time. You guys figure it out, whatever you want. I'm throwing up my hands and you can figure it out. So, yeah. So I'm very, very concerned about the uncertainty of governmental policy right now. And then, of course, the third thing Well, we can still talk about that if you have more questions. But look, obviously, the third thing is the tariff issue. And I'll be the first one to tell you, I love manufacturing in this country. We need to make more things here. There's no doubt about it.
None.
No doubt about it. Okay. I get very upset whenever I go to the implement dealer and I see
A filter made in Taiwan or whatever.
a bearing.
Come on.
Okay. A bearing that is made in China that I paid $30 for, by the way, which is kind of a story in of itself that government should kind of almost look into that and say, why the hell is this bearing that only costs 57 cents?
I'll say 75 cents
Why
to
am I
make.
being charged $30 for this? You know, but that's a totally another discussion in of itself.
Agreed.
But that's the other thing that we failed to learn is that before the 1980s, International Harvester was based in Chicago. International Harvester employed in the 1980s 25 to 30,000 people on the south side of Chicago. Okay. They also were in Rock Island, and the Quad Cities were known as the farm capital of the world, the farm machinery capital of the world.
That they were.
Right? So, but what happened? We lost 3 million farmers during that time period. If those farmers were still in business and still buying a new tractor every few years, and if we had a strong ag economy right now, we would be buying brand new tractors and we'd be buying brand new combines. And where are those combines still made? The tractors are still, the red ones are made in Racine. The green ones are still made in Iowa.
For the most part.
You know, the ones that we would buy are made there.
Even still for the most part.
You know.
Because John Deere does have a tractor manufacturing plant. Oh, frick, don't quote me where it's at.
But there's some in Germany.
And I think there's one
France.
in I was going to say Indonesia, maybe even.
Well,
the
the
5,000 series, I think, are over that way somewhere.
John Deere's biggest market is India.
Oh, I totally believe it.
It's India. That's the biggest
Totally
market.
believe it.
Because you have 250 million farmers still in India. 1 billion. And they average about 2 to 3 acres is what they're farming. Which is another joke to me, too, because the administration's saying, oh, we're going to work on getting exports into India. You have farmers in India who are going on hunger strikes, and that's 1/4 of your population. We're just 1% of the population in this country, and people don't want to upset farmers here. Imagine what it's like in India.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that if you have corn-based ethanol, you have the byproducts. Most of India, they're Hindi. They don't eat beef.
No, not at all.
And the other side is a lot of them are Muslims. They don't eat pork.
You're
So-
left with chicken
Yes. Yes.
and fish.
Yes. So maybe could we get some ethanol in there? That wouldn't be a bad thing. But
No.
the idea of selling them corn directly, I have some serious doubts about.
No, I don't know if that's what he meant was by corn directly or soybeans, but maybe other things that we produce in this country that could help them.
Well, I'm just going off of
Yeah, the farming side of things.
I'm more into the idea of what the national corn growers and what they've been promoting online and what they've been taking snippets of the administration's saying, and they're like these little 15-second clips because that's all that they could find, and then they post it out there. And there's been a lot of people who've been asking questions saying, why are we doing this now? So, but on the tariff question, can it be handled better? Yes.
Oh, it absolutely can.
It can be handled
I
better.
mean, this is a tariff war right now. Is
And-
what we're in. Whether we want to admit
Yes.
that or not, we are in a tariff war. The thing that makes me think about the tariffs is, for the short term, it's going to be a struggle. And here's my but, and then this is a big but and / if.
Yeah.
If this government administration can figure it out, 5 years down the road, we're going to be looking a lot better.
Well, here's the thing that we need to remember from the ag perspective. Okay, the first administration that he was in there, half of all the soybeans that China consumed came from the United States. We had the tariff war. They've signed a thing called the BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa. They have their own trade pact now. They don't need the United States. So even today, just 25% of all the soybeans that China consumes comes from the United States. They don't need us anymore.
Still 25% is a lot, though, if you think about it. That's a lot of grain heading
But
that
the
way.
only reason why that they're buying it is because our beans are ready when they are. I would rather have the old days of when we had 50% of it. And so that numbers have been going down every year. And so it's I'm very, very scared about that, which is why I think that we need to be focusing in more on the domestic usage of our products where we can handle it. And Mexico too. Mexico's 40% of our exports go to Mexico.
And north of the border as well.
And Canada too. Yeah.
Their corn and their beans just don't quite hold up to the value that ours has down here.
Right. So
and quality too, for that matter.
And my my header that I have is a MacDon. So that's coming from Canada and Winnipeg. And they make a really nice header. But you know what? There's farmers up in Manitoba who buy John Deere tractors. I'm not as worried about Canada personally. Those people have the same wage scale as we do. It's the third world that I have more concerns with.
As far as
manufacturing and I think the tariff war with Canada is really a dumb problem. That's a really dumb thing.
Look, we're neighbors here. Can't we figure this out like gentlemen? Yeah. Sit down and here's a beer. Let's sit down and talk this over and let's make a plan where everybody can win in this thing.
Right.
When you start talking Mexico and how much we export down there, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
It's 40% of all the corn that we grow.
Of all the corn that we grow.
What we grow goes to Mexico.
No, but they grow quite a bit of beans down there. Is that
in
correct?
Mexico?
Yeah.
No, but actually they were threatening. No, they don't grow as much as beans. It's amazing how reverence they have for the corn plant. And I know this personally because our number one purchaser of our sweet corn are Hispanic families. And I'm at the point now they've been coming from generations. I know what they want. I'll let them go out in the field corn and let them go ahead. And you guys go ahead. You want to make your own tortillas, come back in the fall. I got you non-GMO grain for you that you can make them like your grandma used to make. If you want to go ahead and roll everything up for your tamales, come on out. I've got the perfect corn for you. And they come back year after year. But they take the whole plant.
Yeah.
They have reverence for the whole plant.
Chop her down right off at the roots and just...
Even the most valuable plant is the smut.
Oh, yeah, they love
It's
smut.
the Huitlacoche. It's called Huitlacoche. Mm-hmm. That stuff goes for like $8-10 a pound.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But that's what they like, To each his own.
Exactly. That's my theory.
To each his own.
That's my theory as well.
But yes, but Mexico was even threatening, saying, well, if you're not going to play nice, we're just going to buy from Brazil and Argentina. We can't afford to lose that. And the same thing with the wheat market, too. I'm very scared about those wheat mills closing domestically and going to Mexico.
You think that could happen?
Yes. Yeah. I absolutely. Because we're importing so much produce right now from Mexico. We have so much manufacturing that's gone into Mexico that why can't you have food that the food that we consume now from well, actually Oreo is doing that right now too.
Are they really?
Yes. Maldez owns them. They're making Oreos in Mexico. That
bastards.
Up here. So who knows? But that's scary.
Yeah, it is. And I get both sides of the spectrum. I really do. I understand why this administration is doing what they're doing, trying to bring business back to the United States, trying to employ more people here, bring the incomes up in the places that they're building these things. But on the other hand, until that gets done, we're.
But there's a right way and a wrong way of doing it.
Oh, I don't disagree with that. We're on the same page there, right? We're on the same page. Like, I understand why he's trying to get to be fair on the tariffs, but I also understand that in the short term, it could be very disastrous for anybody here that relies on anything outside the United States as well.
So, looking back on it, if you're a farmer, you haven't been paid yet by the USDA. You're still sitting there waiting for that money. You're looking at the market tanking. even though we've had a little bit of a rebound because the dollar isn't worth anything right now because everybody's pulling out. And then we've got these tariffs. Why are we making it harder for us? I remember in 2013, I'll never forget, everybody loved the Paul Harvey commercial for Dodge trucks, right? Why did Dodge run those ads during the Super Bowl in 2013? Because
they needed to.
Because farmers had money. Farmers had money. My pickup truck that I'm driving, I bought brand new at Harvard Ford, was a 2013 Ford F-150. Farmers had money in 2013.
They did.
And so when farmers have money, this is being a former salesman, right? And I always loved Gordon Stoddy at the auctions. All right, boys. All right. You got a choice now, boys. All right. You can either go ahead and you can either pay the tax man or you can buy that tractor over there. Which one are you going to do?
Yep.
Right? We have been built into our brains that we should be paying tax. Oh, I could have a tractor or I could pay taxes.
I know what I'm picking every time.
That's right. So when we have money, we spend it, we get the economy going. and why they're hamstringing us is crazy.
I don't think they're intentionally hamstringing us, though.
But that's the difference when you're in the seat of government.
And exactly.
You have to be able to see what the consequences of your actions are.
Oh, I agree with that.
Right.
And that's not even just in government. That's in anything.
That's right. And there was, back to my own history, I worked at IDOT for 13 years. And my job was called a local agency liaison, where I went to local municipalities and I explained engineering to them and the motor fuel tax dollars and how that works for townships and municipalities. But the other thing that got on my desk was, hey, Bartman, we've got this farm issue. Can you look at this? And I was on the governor's Advanced Biofuel Task Force, where I got to work with the University of Illinois.
Oh, no kidding.
On advanced biofuels. And it was amazing because we had a pilot program where we were growing meniscus, which is switchgrass, along 51.
Yep.
Right between Bloomington and Decatur. And we set it up that way so that every farmer who was going to the Farm Progress Show would be able to see it. And also they had this big stretch of right-of-way because it's a major, so you well know, road maintenance in the summer is crazy for the amount of mowing that we do. Well, why not turn that into an asset and use that switchgrass and make it into advanced ethanol? And that was a really wonderful program where we learned a lot.
Oh, I bet you did.
And what we did was, in the meantime, we didn't have a plant set up yet. So what did we do with it? You might remember during that time when propane was going for $4.50, $5. Well, with the state, which means that they were paying $6 for it because of the way that the bidding was working. We were going to mow it down, bale it, and we were going to put it in a bale burner and heat it up until we had a market for it.
No kidding.
Yeah. So
did you guys end up doing that then?
We did. We did it for a year, and then unfortunately we had a change in administration, and I lost my job. And that was the end of that program. But it was cool because I got to work with Dr. Hans Blashek, who was basically the I hate to use the term inventor because that's not necessarily true.
He was the brains behind it.
He was the brains really of commercializing ethanol. And then we also did a lot of promotion at the Farm Progress Show because IDOT is the the second largest buyer of biodiesel for the whole fleet, second to the Marine Corps. And that was important that farmers realize that we in the state, we use it. So
that's a lot.
But that's the key is with anything, even from Nike, is your first buyer usually is Uncle Sam, whether you like it or not, because the check is good and it gives you a stable market to get established and allows you to get credit from the bank. And so that's another one of my concerns right now. Why is this administration doing that to us? They know this. There are people there. There are so many smart, good Republicans who can work in these administrations. Why aren't they listening to those people who get it? So that's what I'm nervous about.
No, I can see your point of view. I can see exactly where you're coming from. And you being embedded into the political atmosphere, if you will, you get it probably better than a lot of people do.
Yeah.
You really do. And it is going to be awfully interesting to see what comes down the pipeline here.
Yeah, and hopefully it all works out. Don't get me wrong.
I'm sure it will.
Hopefully it all works out, but you know, if you see somebody driving down the road and you know they're swerving to the left and they're swerving to the right and you know they're drunk off their butt, I'm sorry, I'm calling 911 because I want the sheriff to stop that guy. I don't want that guy to get killed. And I also care about the innocent bystander who could be killed by that drunk driver, you know? So let's stop this now.
It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I want to circle back just a little bit. You are in all these USDA programs. So how long?
Only in one. I'm in one.
You're just in one now?
The
minimal till.
Because I never qualified, Kyle. That was the other nice thing about it. I never qualified. If you go into the NRCS program, was through the USDA, that's a 5-year commitment. Most of my land is rented. It's all a 1-year lease. I never qualified for anything.
Oh.
So that's the other nice thing about this program. And that's why another reason why it was so successful. Like DeLong, there was 675,000 acres that they got enrolled in that.
That's quite a bit.
And I went down to testify in Springfield to talk about this. And everybody.
So wait a minute. They called you up and said, hey, we want you to come down here and have a conversation on this? Or
yeah, I got a phone call for that one. And by the way, just to because I've gotten some feedback from some people saying, John, why are you doing this? I've gotten a lot of farmers who've thanked me and a lot of farm groups who have thanked me for doing this too. So just to thank you for allowing me to get that out there.
Of course.
But I am, as I said, I never qualified for it within.
Because you didn't have the 5-year lease.
Because I didn't have a 5-year lease.
Yeah. Which some of that stuff they do is bullshit. Like, pardon my French. It really is. It's like, you've been farming this piece of ground for 20 years on a 1-year contract. You both understand each other. They're not going to take it out from underneath you. And then the USDA says, oh, no, we need that 5-year lease. But wait a minute.
But that's why we have too many lobbyists. Because they're the ones who get the lobby to put these policies into place, right? So going back to you just perked me up again.
Heck yeah!
That 600
keep you perked up.
That's 675,000 acres in the DeLong program. Well, Chicago in Cook County, their forest preserve is only 70,000 acres. Down in the Shawnee National Forest is only 160,000 acres.
Only,
right? So you think about you think about the impact that's having right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people aren't washing their cars every 5 minutes like they did in other years because the soil isn't blowing around here as much. So, but think about that income stream that can come in. And I'm a firm believer eventually we're going to be paid for carbon. There is no doubt in my mind.
Really? You think so,
Absolutely.
Huh?
No doubt in my mind. That is going to be what the straw market is to wheat, is going to be what you're able to sequester, your carbon that you're able to sequester. Absolutely. Easily 3 to 5 tons per acre. In Europe right now, you know what that's worth?
No.
What the farmers are getting in Europe? Mm-mm. They're getting close to $300 an acre. Wouldn't that be nice for everybody if you got $300 additional dollars an acre?
See, the funny thing though is now the farmer comes out and me and says, yeah, that's great, but it's going to go somewhere. You guarantee if that comes out, seed corn's going to go, oh, look at this. John over here is making another $250 an acre. I guess we're going to bump it up $50 a bag or $60 a bag. Your landlord's going to come around and go, oh, you're getting that carbon footprint. You know, let's bump that up another 50. It's going to tail down to the end where you might get that $250 or $300 and you might only profit another 50 or 60.
Yeah, but still at the same time with that money in the short term, hey, that's a down payment for you to buy your neighbor's farm now. You know, and that to me is something that's missing, is how the previous generations, how much easier it was for a young farmer to go out and buy farmland. And now, even with the USDA programs, how challenging and difficult it is.
Well, and I know everything's relative, but when you're buying a $100 100-acre farm and you're paying $2,600, $2,500, $2,400 an acre. And in today's world, you're buying a 40-acre farm and it's going for $12,000. Like,
Yeah.
like I said, it's relative. I know back then they didn't make what we're making now, but on the other hand, like you said, back in the 90s, corn went up to $4.
In the 70s.
And what are we at today?
In the 70s, it was $4.
And what are we at today?
Exactly. We're at the same price.
The difference is, though, is we are creating more bushels.
Yes, but that is a problem in of itself.
Well, it can be, right? But for the farmer itself,
I mean, my farm bill right now, what we need to have is another crop in the rotation. We have to have another crop in the rotation.
which is why you do cover crops.
Yes, but cash crop. I'm talking about we need another cash crop in the rotation. We need to put canola in, something that will overwinter, ideally something that you could plant after winter wheat, that you can get that into the ground and overwinter, and so that you can harvest it in the spring or the summer to break that rotation, which is why I always like the switchgrass idea, because we have all these HEL ground where if you could harvest that and bale it,
And create something.
and create something with it, and you're getting 8 to 10 times the energy that you would off of corn-based ethanol. That's fantastic. So now you've got all this marginal ground throughout the country in the United States that's now not being in production.
There's marginal ground?
Never. Never.
Yeah, just go to a conservation area right now. That's marginal ground.
Right. I mean, you just kind of going around. It just cracks me up how the conservation district's taking all this land and they're just doing all their live burns and everything else. And I'm going,
If they even do live burns anymore.
and not to mention, but how much they're paying for that seed. We complain about $300 a bag for a bag of seed corn. My gosh, they're paying $500-$600 for basically glorified cover crop seed.
Exactly.
That I can get. I'm a cover crop dealer. Anybody else could easily become a cover crop dealer. That you could pay for $20 a bag for, $15-$20 a
Have
bag.
you thought about, is there any way to put in a cover crop over winter that you couldn't harvest in the springtime?
A cover crop?
Yeah.
Well, like cereal rye. I mean, that's my number one. My favorite, it still is, it's cereal rye. I really like the diverse mixes and everything else. That really only works after winter wheat. That's when you really get the most bang for your buck. And like for me personally, I use biosolids. I'll get it. Mm-hmm. I'll get them put on after wheat. And then I put my advanced cover crop where I can get 150 pounds of nitrogen on naturally, not having to pay for it.
Correct.
My goal is for my corn ground, I don't put any more than 50 units of N. That is my goal on everything.
Wow, that's great.
And then I do the Haney test. But you have to do it. You have to get it from the right spot. You have to have a really good Haney test and go out there and take that soil sampling. And then I Y drop it because my CECs are too low.
Gotcha.
Big fan of Y drop. It's a different world in Moringa.
Well,
in the sand.
You guys have a lot of sand down there.
It's a very big challenge.
So hard.
Very big challenge.
It's so hard because it holds zero moisture,
zero nutrients.
Zero nutrients. It's just so tough down there.
My family paid. When I took over the farm, going back to it, I came back to the farm because my dad got sick back in roughly 2010, and he was sitting in St. Anthony's. And he got sick over Christmas. He ended up having a major heart attack. He had a stroke. And I'm like, what are we going to do as a family? What are we going to do? I'm like, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to farm this. We can get this done. Big fight within the family, but we can get this stuff done. It's not that hard. And so we did get it done. So it's another reason why I'm fighting so hard. Why do we do this? We all have good friends who even to this day would kill to be in this spot of where we're at.
I agree.
And,
I agree.
And we owe it to I feel bad for our cousins who didn't have the opportunity. Those are the ones I feel bad for.
Yeah. And there's opportunity everywhere.
Sure.
It's whether you are wanting to take that
Sure.
plunge, that jump,
Sure.
whatever you want to call it, to be able to go take that on.
Sure.
Farming is not easy.
No,
you're like, oh, this ain't going to be too bad. This ain't that hard. It can be very, very difficult.
No,
it can be very difficult.
Those first generation farmers are really important. And going back to another government program that's so important that I just learned about as a vegetable grower, that I admittedly would have been on this like a fly to manure, is the Illinois Eats program, where vegetable growers can take their surplus vegetables and they can sell it to schools and food pantries. That's huge. That is huge. But that program has been cut, and there's no reason for it. And those are and I was in Springfield just hearing people testify, saying, I'm a first generation farmer. I've had a full-time job. I went to the bank this winter. I got money for a tractor. I went ahead and got an operating loan for another 20 acres to grow these vegetables. And now I'm stuck. I don't have a market anymore. I can't handle this. I'm going bankrupt. And you're like, that's not right. That's not right. You're selling to a food pantry. I'm on the Moore board, which is the food pantry in Marengo. I donate a lot of my produce to the food pantries throughout the whole county. The need is great. The Moore board in Marengo, we serve about 2,000 people.
Wow. It's quite a bit.
Which is roughly between 10 and 20% of the population. How far do you want to draw out from it?
Right.
And it's only increasing. So it's so much cheaper that way if you can buy the produce from the farmer.
It is.
Than going from the grocery store. And then it's better for the environment because it's coming locally. You're not shipping in stuff from Mexico.
It's not getting shipped everywhere. It's literally going down the road, theoretically.
Right. That's right.
So, well, I think this is a perfect time to wrap this thing up.
Sounds good. Yeah.
John, thank you for coming over and having a conversation about all this. Like I said, some of this stuff I had an idea on, other stuff I have a friggin' clue. So,
well, there's one thing I want to say, which is very important for people. There's two things. Number one is you talked about what news you watch. Don't waste your time trying to find it on the news, especially with ag stuff. All you need to do is follow the House and Senate Agriculture Committees. All those hearings are online, and they tape them. You can sit them at home and watch it, and you can make your own decision for yourself and listen to the testimony of people who are coming before these boards. So that's important. The other thing that I do want to say is if you have the opportunity to allow the media onto your farm, it's not that big of a deal. Okay? I know there's some people who are super scared about it, and I make no bones about it. I am far from having the prettiest farm in McHenry County, and they came onto my farm. Okay? And it's more important that we get our story out there as farmers.
Yeah, and I'll add to that just a little bit here is I found that out even with podcasting. It's just you and me here. There's no that's right. Yeah, there's cameras and microphones, but it's literally just you and me.
That's right.
And you would be surprised at how many people are like, no, man, I'm microphone shy, I'm camera shy, and we totally get that.
Right.
But if you are involved in the ag community and you want your word to be spoken and you want people to hear, you gotta do it, man, one way or another. Hell, come on this podcast, have a conversation just like John did, just like you did. Come here and have a conversation, and maybe that'll ease you up to being part of the media then.
Well, it's, as I said, it's really not that hard, and you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have a public relations degree. In fact, it's better if you don't, because you're more authentic.
You're more real.
You're more real. People want real. And
I agree.
It's on with people.
I agree. I agree. Well, like I said, John, thanks for taking the time coming over and hanging out and catching up and shooting the shit. And well,
thanks for inviting me. It was a good time.
It's been a good experience.
Yeah,
all the way around.
I learned something. Thanks, buddy. Good seeing you.
It's good seeing you. Until next time.
Sounds good.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.